Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our presentation of The Conductor. I'm so excited to be joined here for a Q&A conversation with the director, Bernadette Wegenstein, and producer, Annette Porter, to answer a few questions. But first of all, first and foremost, thank you for sharing your work with us, and congratulations. We're so excited you're screening with us at Dandy Seals.
Thank you so much. We're excited too.
Good. And I'm sure our audiences are excited as well, having just been taken on quite the journey with your film. And so I'd love to just get right into it and ask you first and foremost a little bit about the impetus for this project and where your journey with Marin and with this world of classical music started.
So it started when I moved to Baltimore here, where I work at Johns Hopkins as a professor of media and film studies. I was told, oh, Baltimore, you'll like it, not just for, this new gig at the university, but also there's a really great orchestra. And, I grew up in Vienna, and I sort of grew up with classical music, and my grandparents were classically trained musicians. Although this was the Nazi era, so it wasn't like they had big careers or anything, but it's one of these things that kind of are in the family and that, you always think about as you grow up. And I played the piano as a child. But anyway, so when I moved to Baltimore, I saw the BSO and I saw Marin conduct. And it really struck me, first of all, how amazing the orchestra sounded. I think it was Brahms that I saw first, but also the fact that I was so not used to seeing a woman conductor. And I thought, oh my God, what is wrong? Here I am, a feminist filmmaker and theoretician and everything. And what is it? And then I realized, obviously, there are no women conductors, and this is how it all started.
Yeah.
And maybe Annette wants to tell the story about how we connected through the university.
Yes, and again, it was through the university. Berna had already been filming with Marin, and you'd been filming for quite a while, and was thinking about bringing on board a producer. And one of the deans of the school connected the two of us, who was known to be quite a networker. Just said, "Why don't you guys meet?" And we both said, "Well, let's meet, let's see." And it was immediate. It's a really compelling story. Berna had a very strong vision of how she wanted to tell it. It's the kind of story I'm always attracted to, sort of untold stories, people's stories who have been ignored or usurped or squashed. So it was a very immediate and easy decision for me to join up with the team.
Yeah, and that makes a ton of sense to me because it does read, very academically rich. So it doesn't surprise me that you have this sort of foundation with the university. Can you speak to what parts of your vision, were really enhanced by your, teaching and your learning at the university, and also this, really deferent sense of history and history uncovering?
Absolutely. I think that, for instance, it was relatively easy to find out the lack of a canon for, for the historization of women conductors, because, you can read this up in any academic article. But then it was also enhanced by the fact that Marin herself told me the story that she came across a woman in Lucerne, which is one of the locations we film at. And she was, there in the audience as Marin was conducting a women's workshop for women conductors. And the woman, she said, seemed to know a lot about conducting. And it turned out that it was Sylvia Kadoof, who actually had been in her, her own role, a quite famous conductor, the first assistant also to some big orchestras, but nobody had ever heard of her. And so, I think what helped working at the university is, first of all, taking time to search archives, to look for footage and images of, this forgotten history, and then also connecting with Marin Alsop's own personal archives at Boston University, where they gave us access to, some of these string fever and other, archival footage that really told the story of her becoming a world-renowned conductor.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the great strengths of the film is how you balanced, this understanding of her professional life and her tremendous accomplishments, and also, a little bit about her personal life and what that means when it comes together. Can you speak to how challenging it was to do that weaving, and where your vision sort of came and evolved around how to balance that, and what your public and private sort of interest in her sort of came to be?
So I think, we as a viewer, I know it's new. We know Marin is a famous conductor going into watching this film, the way that it presents itself and the way that some people might know about her. So I was interested in really showing her ascension to fame, and this, backstory of her history with the right story points. But always, as I walked forward in the story, two steps or so, coming back a step to remind the viewer of how hard she had it, how marginalized she was, how offended, how humiliated, how what kind of sexism and to a certain extent homophobia too she had to endure. Um, and so I think for me structuring this, it was very important to weave in the success with the setbacks and
Mm.
with how easily the success would have not unfolded had she not stood up and really persisted. And maybe Annette wants to say something about that, because this is one of the most important points
Yeah.
making.
And I think you really captured, Berna, the cost, the personal cost to her. And she believed that she did it for herself, but she also did it for a broader reason. And I think that sometimes helped her with the prices she had to pay. And like Berna, we both believe very strongly that sometimes when there have been advances, it's easy to forget how difficult it was. And I think something that gets constantly reinforced to us these days is that you really shouldn't forget, because it really is right there. So I think that that's important to remind people about the struggle to get to where you were. It sometimes reinforces the fragility of the success, I think.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think that Annette was also, introducing me to a great cinematographer, and they were, we developed a way to dramatize the struggle visually, because to go back to your question about how Marin is, I mean, she's a little, she's obviously she's this force of nature, but privately she can be very withdrawn and a little introverted. So that we needed a means to really get close to her, and we ended up doing phantom, footage, and also a lot of slow-mo, to not just to see the musical action, which of course is fascinating, but also to really slow down time to get kind of really close to her, and that was a brilliant way to show and reveal the wounds, while of course keeping the respect and admiration for the character.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's all so critical to the story, the full picture. Tell us a little bit more about your working relationship with Marin, and how you built that trust, and how you were able to get such really rich personal moments with her on
I
screen.
mean, I think that it built over time, and it all in all, it took us 4 years to make the film, which is not very long, but it's also not short. I think at the beginning, it took me a while to really ask the right questions of her in terms of music. And so I actually ended up going back to your question of the university. I worked with a tutor at the Peabody Conservatory, and she went into studying scores with me. And I mean, I know how to read music, but I hadn't really studied a full score for 100 people orchestra before. And so I needed to start, to learn her language a little bit in order to ask some, some questions of her musically. And then, I, of course, as a, as a curious person, and also mostly what interests me, I think, as a documentarian, is always the emotions that a character or location or an animal, it doesn't matter, whatever you film, conveys. And so I was interested in her emotional life, and I was also understanding, that it'll be hard to really get close to her. So, I mean, I went, the one interview where she cries and where she's very vulnerable, that one we made on a day when she was really, I could tell she's opening up. And I said to Annette, today we need to do this interview at the BSO backstage. And we were actually not set up to do so. And so the visuals, could be better, but we had to go with this moment that she opened up, and we all just kind of did it. And I remember we started really late. She had just given a concert, and then the orchestra said, well, we don't know if we can actually let you in. And it really pushed, because I had this feeling this is the right day to do it. And it was. So I had to really read her mind a little bit. And then, with this whole setback of the BSO, when she was finally hired, and then they said, oh, we can't watch a woman conduct and move her rear end or whatever, they said. That one, it was a journalist who gave me access to this information. And it was, at the beginning of our journey, she said, I never want this to be revealed in this film. And I said, yeah, okay, that's fair. But we ended up doing it because it is part of the truth of her story. And I very much believe in the saying of an amazing feminist philosopher that, the truth will reveal itself no matter what. It doesn't matter whether you present it or not, it's there and it's productive. And therefore, I think film is a medium that can really handle it, because it's always looking back or forward. It's not really to expose someone and embarrass them, because you have all these dramaturgical means to make them feel comfortable. And we had the graphic designers who who dramatized this offensive letter that was written against her. But that part was not something that she agreed to do when we started making this film.
But yeah, it comes, like you said, it comes with time, and such a long project. You can feel the comfort and how you were able to peel back some of those layers. Annette, what was that like? What was that pivoting like? You have to be so responsive to capture, moments like that. What's that like creatively?
Yeah, I think, one of the words that Bernadette just used was trust. And I think it held through not only the trust between Maren and Berna, which was huge, and it built over time until she did feel comfortable and she did want to reveal these moments, but there was an enormous amount of trust all through our team. And so that contributes to a flow. And we trusted we had the right sound people at the right time so that they could almost disappear into the background when the filming was going. And we trusted that, there was somebody's instincts were going to kick in and we might pivot. And there weren't, and it was all okay. We knew it was, we just were all going to be flexible with each other. But I do think the bedrock of that is trust amongst the team and then with the contributor.
Yeah,
Totally.
Absolutely. And again, it does read that way. And yeah, I'm going to go loftier here a little bit, but I wonder what you both feel sort of is or isn't analogous, in this story of how challenging this space was for women in the classical music world, how it feels analogous or not to your journeys and careers as female filmmakers and the challenges you face in that way, and what it means to be putting out something, that is so evocative and so unearthing of history in a moment like this one. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think it means a lot to us, and and we can only, I'll give Annette her time, but for me, so it's I see it not just as of course a lack of opportunity that is given to people who aren't in the mainstream in general, and we can talk about that for the next 2 hours, and one day hopefully we will be able to. But I think it really starts with the trust or the confidence that you have in yourself and what is expected of you. So I never really even thought I could be a filmmaker because nobody expected that of me. But it's the same thing as growing up in Vienna and being really bad in math, because nobody expected me to be good in it, right? So it starts there. And I think it's a huge thing, because if you think about classical music and then anybody you see is a man. And until the 19th century, women weren't even in orchestras playing music, no less, of course, conducting, or no less being gay conductors. So then it's not just a question of who breaks this, canon and makes it, but who even asks themselves this question. And we're missing out on so many people who might consider a profession, that is outside of what the mainstream expects. And that's a very harsh reality, because culture is intrinsically conservative. And if you don't put your foot down and you do something to counter it, it's not going to change. And so what I feel or felt as a woman is I felt comfortable, in an academic career, but I really, was always drawn to showing the stuff I was analyzing and not just telling it. But I didn't feel it was my place, because there wasn't this person who said, Berna, you should be a filmmaker. There was never any of these people in my life. So I think it's I want to just talk about, the confidence that you need to build in a new generation of people to pretty much be anybody they want, not just professionally, also as an identity. So, but then Annette can talk also about the numbers that are shocking still in the film industry.
It's very shocking. It's shocking that the number, how few stories, female stories about women, I'm not going to call them female stories about women are told, stories about homosexuality that are told in a way where the story is told, not as an outsider looking in, as an object, but really opening the door to people's stories, whether it's people of color. And so we have a real lack of it in the industry. And still behind the scenes, the people who are actually creating the work. We had a female cinematographer, a director of photography on this, Shauna Hagen, who's a beautiful filmmaker, but there's still very few women behind the scenes as well. And we constantly run into this, as Bernard was saying, with if you're not seeing people in these roles, then it's hard for you to imagine yourself in it. And similarly, if you're not surrounded by stories that have a resonance with yours personally, both in the story itself and in the way it's told, it's hard to imagine your place. So I think we've made progress, but the numbers show us that actually it's very small progress overall.
Where to go?
It's small and slow. And the last thing I want to add to that is, Ash, that I just very strongly believe in art in general, but film as a medium that carries the lived experience very strongly. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to have lived the experience yourself, but you have to have put yourself, at least, narratively or in some form of imagination in those shoes. I strongly believe in that. And if we want to have more diverse stories, then we need more diverse storytellers, because they will have access to the lived experience. And it's something very, a very delicate question about that. And of course, as you know, there's the other side of it, which is the cultural appropriation. But we do believe that in this film, we really tried to kind of retrace Marin's steps with her own language, which is music. And that's why the film is, from A to Z, music that she conducted. And we edited it super carefully with the help of a classically trained violinist editor. So because that lived experience of what she wanted as a character, namely being a conductor, meant that we as the makers of this film needed to really embed and embrace her desire fully and full-heartedly. So
don't you think, sort of, Berna, that her inner voice is musical too?
Yes.
It is the music.
Absolutely.
It comes across so well, like you said, you feel the rhythm of it, it's very musical. to watch as well. But you've teed me up so nicely here, because you may not know that the name of our festival, Damn These Heels, comes from the idea that, you know, to gain empathy, you have to put yourself in someone else's shoes, heels or whatever they may be. And it draws me to my last question for you guys, which is around, you know, what it means for you to be playing this film at a queer film festival. I'm so excited because I think it's really important to have these films that, like, exactly like you said, they tell the story, and then there are some truths in there, like that, you know, that she is a gay woman and she is a woman, and that's all part of it. And I'm really proud to be able to present it, especially after, you know, it has a life also at non-queer festivals, because there's overlap, and that's important to me. So what does this context sort of mean for you folks, and to play the film with us? What does that feel like?
It means the world. Like we were saying, you know, we just came off a call with our distributor, I mean, a sales agent, and we have a lot of invitations, which is really wonderful. I'm very proud, from so many festivals around the world. And they told us about your festival. I didn't know it. And I said, absolutely. And Annette, the same thing. I think it's so important to organize the content as you do, Ash, and your team, and to sort of normalize the margin by that, because you are a commercial festival, you know, it's not, you know, it's not a niche. You're really putting on a big festival, and it has its focus on queer films, or films with queer content to a certain extent. And ours, you know, factors in its own way. And there are, I'm sure, many other ways, of course, because her being gay isn't really very strongly dramatized in the film. And I'm just to tell you why that is also because I didn't want to point a finger on that factor when it wasn't part of the storyline, because we see she's gay, and so yeah, that's, you know, what it is. But I do think that, of course, her being excluded from the canon, you know, it's a combination of being a woman, being a gay woman, being an American woman, I don't know, in Europe and all that. But I didn't want to sort of, you know, make it into anything else, but always the music. I always went back to the music theme in the film. But again, I think it's so important to present this content and really make it consumable for a mass audience, as you guys do. And it's the only way we can change what we've just said earlier, the way that we perceive the world in one way, but rather we want to perceive it in a multiple way, in a fluid way. And I'm, you know, completely sold on queer film festivals.
I'm so glad we could get you over and play the film. It's just such a pleasure. And like you said, I think it's very important to have, you know, matter of factness be part of queer stories as well, and have it be, you know, this is a film about music first and foremost, and that it was important to me, and I'm so glad we were able to include it in our lineup. But thank you both so much for joining me today. I'm sure the audiences are riotously applauding you from home. I think that this conversation is so enlightening and really brought the film to life for me. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Ash. It's great to be here.
And people can sign up on our website to see what's happening with the film, next steps, more screenings, theconductor.com. Anyway, nice to meet you.